When someone disrespects you, the first instinct most men have is to react. They want to call it out, correct it, demand an apology, or try to prove their worth. But that reaction is exactly what drains your power. The move that actually creates regret, the move that silently flips the dynamic without you lifting a finger, is going completely silent and locking in on your mission. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. It's the moment where you stop feeding the situation with your emotions and start feeding your life with your focus. When you pull your attention away, everything changes. You stop responding instantly. You stop explaining your side. You stop chasing clarity or fairness. You remove your energy from the situation and put it right back into yourself. That's when they start feeling the distance, not because you're trying to punish them, but because you're finally prioritizing you. Silence isn't about ignoring someone. It's about refusing to pour effort into a place that doesn't honor you. The moment you go silent, you force them to sit with their own behavior. People don't reflect when you're arguing with them. They don't rethink their choices when you're giving long speeches or trying to prove your value. They reflect when the noise is gone. They rethink when your presence, the one they got used to, suddenly isn't there. Silence creates emotional contrast. Before, you were available. You were responsive. You were predictable. Now you're focused, distant, and untouchable. That shift hits different. But the silence means nothing if you sit there waiting for them to notice. The real power comes from what you do with that silence. You take that energy and you channel it straight into your mission, the thing that defines your direction as a man. Your goals, your discipline, your routine, your body, your money, your craft, your growth. You don't just pull back, you level up. And when you combine absence with improvement, that's when regret hits the hardest. You start waking up earlier. You start stacking wins. You start fixing the areas of your life you ignored for too long. And as you do, something shifts inside you. You stop caring about the disrespect because you're too busy improving the man who allowed it. That's the real transformation, not proving your worth to someone else, but proving it to yourself through consistent action. Silence also builds emotional control. You learn to respond rather than react. You learn to detach rather than cling. You learn that you don't need someone's validation to feel grounded. And the more grounded you become, the more powerful you appear. Not because you're trying to intimidate anyone, but because discipline has a presence that can be felt without you saying a word. People respect what they feel they could lose. When you go silent and elevate yourself, you become that loss. Not because you're playing games, but because you've stepped back into the life you were supposed to be building in the first place. Your attention becomes valuable. Your time becomes valuable. Your presence becomes valuable. And when someone realizes they disrespected a man who refuses to act desperate, refuses to argue, and refuses to beg for basic treatment, that's when the regret starts to sink in. The goal isn't to make anyone feel bad. The goal is to reclaim your power so deeply that you don't need anyone to feel anything for you to move forward. You become a man whose direction speaks louder than his emotions, whose silence speaks louder than his explanations, and whose growth speaks louder than any disrespect ever could. And the simple truth is this: when you choose your mission over reacting, you don't lose anything, you only rise. Most people think the only way to deal with disrespect is to confront it with arguments, long explanations, or emotional reactions. But the moment you start explaining yourself, you give away the very power you're trying to hold. When someone crosses a boundary, the strongest move you can make isn't yelling, debating, or trying to convince them why they were wrong. The real strength is reinforcing your boundaries quietly, firmly, and without defending your decision. Because when you enforce something without explanation, you communicate that your standards are not negotiable. They are not up for debate. They simply exist, and you either respect them or you lose access to the parts of you that were once freely available. When you pull back your time, your energy, or your availability after someone disrespects you, it is not an act of punishment. It's an act of self-respect. You're not trying to make them feel guilty. You're simply making sure you don't stay in spaces where your value is taken for granted. And when you hold that line without dramatics, people feel it far more deeply than if you tried to force them to understand. Silence plus standards hits harder than any emotional reaction ever will. The truth is, most people test boundaries unconsciously. They want to see whether the version of you they're dealing with is the real one, or if you're just talking. Anyone can say they have self-respect. Anyone can say they won't tolerate certain behaviors. But when you calmly remove yourself from a situation, when you stop engaging in conversations that drain you, when you limit access to your presence without making a speech about it, that's when people realize you're serious. You don't prove your boundaries, you live them. What makes this move so powerful is that it shifts the dynamic instantly. You take the focus off the disrespect and put it back on your standards. Instead of arguing over what happened, you demonstrate what you expect moving forward. And when you stop trying to be understood, you become understood. People feel the weight of consequences when they arrive quietly, not when they're screamed into existence. Reinforcing boundaries without explaining yourself also protects your emotional control. Explaining tends to come from insecurity, the fear that the other person won't see your side unless you spell it out. But the truth is, people don't need more words, they need different behavior. And when you act from a place of clarity, you stop needing reassurance that you made the right choice. You become comfortable letting people think whatever they want while you stay rooted in what you know you deserve. This isn't about being cold or heartless. It's about valuing your inner peace enough to walk away from anything that disturbs it. When you stop rewarding disrespect with attention, you change what you're willing to participate in. You stop chasing people who lack effort. You stop giving priority to situations that drain you. And without announcing it, you show that you are done accepting less than what aligns with your standards. There's also another layer to this. People pay more attention to what you do than what you say. When they see that you didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't fight for the bare minimum, but instead moved differently, that shift sticks with them. They notice the space you created. They notice the balance you maintained. They notice that your self-respect isn't loud, it's consistent. And that consistency is what makes people rethink how they treated you. Boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. They don't block everyone out. They simply allow in only what's good for you. And when someone realizes that their behavior disqualified them from the version of you they took for granted, regret shows up on its own. You don't force it, you don't request it, you don't seek validation for the decision. You just maintain your standards and let them do the work. And the truth is simple. When you stop explaining yourself and start enforcing what you expect, you stop losing yourself in situations that never valued you in the first place. One of the most powerful silent moves you can make after being disrespected is upgrading your appearance and overall presence. And this isn't about being superficial or trying to show off. It's about aligning the way you present yourself with the value you know you carry. When someone disrespects you, what they're really telling you is that they've stopped seeing the strength, the direction, or the self-respect you should naturally embody. So instead of trying to change their perception with words, you change the way you show up, And that shift speaks louder than anything you could ever say. When you start improving your appearance, you rebuild your relationship with yourself, you tighten up your style. You get a cleaner haircut, your clothes fit better, your posture improves, your grooming becomes sharper and more intentional. And none of this is done for them. It's done for the man staring back at you in the mirror. Because when you improve your image, you're not adjusting for someone else's attention. You're adjusting for your own identity. You're building a presence that reflects discipline, energy, and confidence, instead of neglect or self-doubt. It's not about trends or expensive outfits. It's about choosing a look that signals self-control. The moment you start taking care of your body, your skin, your hair, your scent, your clothing, you naturally elevate the way you feel. And that's the part people notice the most. Confidence is visible even when you say nothing. And when someone who once disrespected you sees that new version of you, the more polished, more focused, more grounded version, it disrupts their entire perception. They expected you to shrink, instead you sharpened, and it goes deeper than appearance. Your presence shifts when your habits change. You walk differently when you've been hitting the gym consistently. Your shoulders sit higher, your energy is calmer. Your eye contact becomes steady, not searching. You carry yourself like a man who knows he has direction. And when a person sees that growth happening silently, without you announcing it, regret often comes naturally, not because you're trying to make them feel that way, but because they never expected your improvement to be the response to their disrespect. Working on your body is a major part of this transformation. You don't need to become a bodybuilder. You just need discipline. The gym becomes the place where you process, rebuild, and regain strength mentally as much as physically. Every rep is a reminder that you're choosing improvement over reaction. While they may expect you to fall apart, you're in the gym sweating out everything that was weighing on you. And the body you build through discipline becomes a silent statement they can't ignore. Then there's the aura that comes from someone who's taking their life seriously. People can feel when you're leveling up. They can sense when your priorities have changed. When you upgrade your appearance, your habits, and your environment, you create an energy that shows you no longer depend on anyone's approval. You're not seeking validation from the person who disrespected you. You're creating a version of yourself that you respect. And that shift is magnetic. What makes all of this so effective is that none of it requires a single argument. No long paragraphs, no emotional reactions, no trying to get someone to acknowledge their mistake. You make the upgrades quietly. You let your results speak. You let the new version of you walk into the room, and that version naturally demands a different level of respect. In the end, appearance and presence aren't about vanity. They're about signaling who you are becoming. When someone disrespects you and your response is to elevate yourself, you're telling the world and yourself that you refuse to stay at the level where that behavior was possible. And that's the kind of growth no one ever forgets. One of the most subtle yet powerful silent moves you can make after being disrespected is stopping the habit of overgiving and learning to match energy rather than emotion. Most men don't realize how often they give too much attention, too much reassurance, too much effort, too much access, especially to someone who hasn't earned it. And when disrespect enters the picture, that imbalance becomes even more obvious. You start chasing clarity. You start trying to fix the tone. You try to bring things back to how they were. But every time you overextend yourself, you reinforce the dynamic that allowed the disrespect in the first place. Matching energy is the shift that breaks that cycle without saying a word. Matching energy isn't about playing games. It's not about being cold or trying to manipulate someone into caring. It's simply about aligning your effort with what's being given to you. If someone gives you inconsistency, you stop providing consistency for them. If someone responds slowly, you stop responding instantly. If someone pulls back, you stop pushing forward. When you do this without anger, without explanation, and without passive-aggressive behavior, you allow the natural balance of respect to rebuild itself, either through their effort or through your distance. The reason this move is so effective is because people feel effort. They feel when you're carrying the relationship on your back. They feel when you're trying harder than they are. And often, that extra effort becomes invisible to them because they get used to it. The moment you stop overgiving, the moment you stop pouring energy where it isn't being returned, it creates a contrast that forces them to recognize the weight you were holding. You didn't say a word, but the imbalance becomes obvious. Matching energy also protects your emotional center. When you respond based on your emotions, fear of losing them, fear of conflict, fear of being misunderstood, you abandon your standards just to keep the peace. When you match effort instead of emotion, you stay grounded. You stop self-betraying. You make decisions based on logic, self-respect, and balance rather than insecurity. And the calmer your energy becomes, the stronger your presence becomes. That shift alone makes people rethink how they treated you because you're no longer operating from a place of need. And here's the truth. Overgiving is usually rooted in a desire for approval. You try to be enough by doing more. You try to win someone back by proving your loyalty. You try to repair things by carrying the emotional load for both people. But that only teaches them that you'll tolerate more than you should. When you match energy, you break that pattern. You communicate without speaking that your value doesn't depend on how much you give. It depends on how much you honor yourself. This shift can be uncomfortable at first, especially if you're used to being the one who tries harder. But with time, you realize how liberating it is. You stop feeling drained. You stop feeling ignored. You stop feeling like you're the only one investing. You stop forcing connections that should be mutual. And the moment you stop forcing, you give the other person space to show their true intentions. If they care, they close the gap. If they don't, the distance reveals that you were carrying the relationship alone. The most powerful part is that matching energy doesn't require confrontation. You don't have to announce anything. You don't have to explain why you're no longer overgiving. You simply shift your behavior and allow the dynamic to realign naturally. People respect what they don't feel entitled to. When your energy becomes balanced with theirs, they either rise to meet your level or they fall away. Either outcome protects your peace. And the simple truth is this: when you stop overgiving and match energy instead of emotion, you stop losing yourself trying to keep people who were never matching you in the first place. One of the strongest silent shifts you can make after being disrespected is building a life that doesn't revolve around one person. A lot of men don't realize how much of their emotional world, their free time, and their mental energy they've unconsciously centered around someone else. They make that person the default source of connection, validation, and attention. And when disrespect happens, that entire structure shakes because everything was built around one emotional pillar. But the moment you take your focus off one individual and start building a broader, stronger, more fulfilling social life, everything changes, not just for them, but for you. When you stop putting all your energy into one relationship and start investing in friendships, community, purpose, and environments that uplift you, you instantly shift the power dynamic. You're no longer waiting for texts. You're no longer depending on one person's mood to determine your own. You're no longer hanging onto moments because you have nothing else going on. You start reconnecting with the world outside of that situation, and you realize how much life you had been ignoring. This doesn't mean jumping into dating or seeking attention to compensate. This is about building a social foundation that supports who you are becoming. You start reconnecting with old friends, or you make new ones. You join environments that align with your goals, fitness groups, hobby circles, business networks, creative communities. You surround yourself with people who respect you, people who bring something positive into your world, people who reflect the kind of energy you want to give back. The reason this move is so powerful is because it breaks the emotional dependency that often fuels disrespect in the first place. When your world is too small, one person's withdrawal feels massive. When your world is full, one person's behavior barely dents your emotional state. And that shift in your internal balance becomes visible from the outside. People can sense when they are no longer the center of your attention. They feel when your happiness no longer hinges on their effort. They notice when you have options, when your life is moving, when your schedule is full, and your energy is focused on things that grow you. And here's the silent part. You don't announce it. You don't post it online. You don't try to show anyone you're busy. You just actually become busy. You genuinely fill your time with things that matter. You create routines that don't leave room for dwelling on disrespect. You build momentum, and momentum is magnetic. When someone who disrespected you sees that your world didn't collapse, that you didn't beg, that you didn't chase, that you didn't lose yourself, they start to question the role they played in your life. They expected you to pull on them harder. Instead, you stepped into environments where you're valued. That contrast, that realization that life moves on without them, is what creates regret. Not because you forced it, but because they see you thriving where they thought you'd struggle. Another layer to this is how you begin to feel internally. A full, active social life naturally raises your confidence. You feel supported, you feel respected, you feel connected, you feel balanced. And when you feel those things consistently, you naturally become less reactive, less needy, and less affected by someone else's temporary behavior. Your emotional thermostat becomes yours again, not something controlled by another person's presence or absence. Building a life that doesn't revolve around them also gives you clarity. When you experience new environments, new people, and new energy, you start seeing that the disrespect you accepted wasn't a reflection of your worth. It was a reflection of where you were placing all your attention. A broader life gives you perspective, and perspective makes it easier to let go of situations that don't serve you. And the truth is simple. When your life becomes bigger than one person, their disrespect becomes smaller than you ever imagined. The final silent move, the one that ties everything together, is letting your results speak instead of your words. This is where everything you've built, your silence, your boundaries, your appearance, your balanced energy, your fuller life, comes together in a way that creates the deepest impact without you ever needing to say a single sentence, because the truth is, the most powerful response to disrespect is transformation. Not the kind you talk about, not the kind you announce, but the kind you live. Most people expect you to defend yourself, argue your point, prove your value, or seek closure. But when you stop explaining and simply improve, you create a type of presence that forces people to see what they once ignored. Letting your results speak means you choose discipline over reaction. You choose growth over confrontation. You choose progress over proving anything. When someone disrespects you, you don't chase validation, and you don't try to win back their approval. Instead, you take all of that emotional energy and redirect it into building the strongest, sharpest version of yourself you've ever been. You let your routine get tighter. You let your goals become non-negotiable. You stay consistent with the habits that shape the man you want to be. And while you're doing that, you stop announcing anything. You stop updating anyone about your journey. You let them see it when they see it. People don't regret disrespect because you told them you're hurt. They regret it when they realize what they lost. Not because you guilted them, because your growth makes it obvious. When they see you becoming more confident, more grounded, more financially focused, more socially connected, more disciplined, more selective with your time, it hits them in a way no argument ever could. Transformation is a mirror. It reflects back to them the reality that they misjudged you. They underestimated you. They treated you like the version of yourself you used to be, not the version you became when you stopped giving away your power. And what makes this move so effective is that it's not petty. You're not growing to prove anyone wrong. You're growing because you finally decided to put yourself first. You're building a life where disrespect doesn't even survive. You're creating a momentum that naturally distances you from anyone who can't match your standards. And the people who once overlooked your value will feel that shift whether you speak to them or not. The irony is that results always communicate more clearly than words. When you start thriving, your presence changes. Your voice becomes calmer, your decisions become clearer, your standards become firmer. You're not trying to impress anyone, you're simply becoming the kind of man who doesn't settle for disrespect. And people sense that strength. They can feel when your life has direction again. They notice when you've outgrown the emotional chaos that once held you back. They see the difference even if they never say it out loud. And while all of this is happening, you remain silent about the past. You don't bring up what they did. You don't revisit the disrespect. You don't seek acknowledgement. You let life show them what your words never needed to say. Because nothing creates regret more effectively than seeing someone you took for granted become someone others admire. Becoming a better man is the ultimate statement, and you deliver it without speaking. And the truth is simple. When you let your growth do the talking, you never have to justify your worth again.